Hi everyone, my name is Erin. I'm here at Brittany and Kevin's home today. I'm really excited to share with you some gardening tips and techniques in the coming weeks as we go into this period of having to be home all the time. I have worked for Brittany and Kevin for a few years now. I also teach gardening at a local prison, and I have a garden at my home. Today I'm going to talk with you about planting your garden. This is a great activity to do on a rainy day and with your family. I like to start the planning process with 5 easy steps, but before we even do that, you want to keep in mind that it's really important to have input from everyone in your household in the decision-making process. People that are included in the decisions tend to want to help more in the garden. So parents, if you want your kids to help you out with some weeding this summer, I highly recommend planting some of those sweet peas, mini peppers, or cherry tomatoes that they love to eat so much. The first of the 5 planting steps starts with making observations and taking notes on what goes on in your yard. Again, this is a really great activity to do with kids. They can take notes every day over the course of a week, or you can do it together. If you're like me, you like to do this alone. You like to sit in your yard with some coffee and tea and just take this time to be present and have some peace observing your yard. A few things you want to take note of are where there's the most sunlight and where there is shade. You want to take notes of what type of sunlight is coming, if you have morning sunlight or afternoon sunlight, or areas that are just seeing shade all day long. Other things to take note of are if you see any pests, deer, rodents, woodchucks, just make sure you keep note and maybe even try and find out where their habitat is in the process. You can also take notes of where your kids like to play, maybe areas you might want to avoid. And finally, where do you have access to water? Does your whole lawn have access to a hose, or are you going to rely on some rainwater, etc.? Step 2 is to make a wish list. This is my favorite part because you can just dream about all the things you want to plant. But the question I like to start with is, what are your goals for your garden? So do you want to have a garden where you can just use all the fresh fruits and vegetables for cooking? Do you want things for pickling or canning? Do you want to attract all the pollinators? Or do you want just all of the above? And then with those goals, make sure that you have plants that will help you achieve those goals. This is the part of the process where you don't want to hold back. You can just dream, because even if you don't have room for it this year, it might be something that you want to plant in future years. So just make a list of everything you want to plant. Step 3 is to design your garden. You want to decide where you're going to plant and how much you have space for as you're starting to plan out what plants are going to go where. You can grow into containers, you can grow into in-ground beds, or you can grow into raised beds. Containers are great because you can move them with the sun. You can move them inside during the winter, so if you have a perennial herb that you want to keep for next year, you can keep it safe indoors. They also save a lot of space. If you just have porch space or you live in an apartment, this is a great time to use those containers. You do have to be wary of how much water you're giving it and make sure that you're having enough nutrients, as containers often cause leaching of nutrients out of the soil. In-ground plots are great. They're a great way to retain water. They're also the most cost-effective and sustainable option. If you live in an apartment or you don't have access to a yard, in-ground plots are great at community gardens, or you can even go in with a neighborhood, ask a friend. In-ground are unfortunately the most susceptible to pests, especially deer and small rodents. So if you're considering doing in-ground, you also might want to consider building a fence or having some sort of liquid fence that you can buy at your local nursery shop. The last is raised beds. I have to say this is my favorite, especially for beginner gardeners. It makes the planning extremely easy. You have exact dimensions that you're working with, so you know exactly how many plants you can fit in there. Also, it's a great way to keep the small pests out, and they look really cool in your yard. Especially right now, you have all this time to do some at-home projects. Why not make a raised bed? Unfortunately, it is the most costly in that first year because you have to buy the materials to build the raised bed and also fill it with soil. However, I think it's a great investment. So now you've decided what combination of in-ground containers or raised beds you want to have in your yard. Now is the fun part where you map it out. I suggest literally making a map. You can sit down with your family and do it, or with your roommates, however you want to do this. You can do it as roughly sketched or as detailed as you want. If you're an organizer, you can get out there with the measuring tape, or if you're like me, you're going to eyeball it and say, that's good enough. Some things to keep in mind as you're creating your map is how much space you have. With a simple Google search, you can find out which plants need what spacing. For example, lettuce is going to need at least 6 inches in between plants, where something like zucchini is going to need at least a foot to a foot and a half in between plants. Other things you want to take note of is the areas that get the most sunlight. You're going to want to plant stuff in areas that only get a little bit of sunlight because it's convenient, but just don't do it. It's not going to work. You can try and you might get some plants, but they're not going to look great. If you want to grow a really successful fruit and vegetable and flower garden, you want as much sun as you can have. So take notes, refer to those notes you made in the first step, and put those fruits and vegetables in the sun. Some herbs can tolerate shade and ground covers can tolerate shade, so you can look that up with a simple Google search again. Other things, rules that I like to follow are put the things you're going to use the most closest to your home. A lot of people like to put herbs and cherry tomatoes or other snacking vegetables close to their house so that when you're cooking and you need some rosemary, you can just go out your front steps and take those herbs. Other things that are fun to think about are crop rotation and companion planting. I'm not going to go into that today, but again, it's something to spend some time researching or reading about. So you have your garden map. You now need to go buy your materials, and that is step 5. So you have your notes, you have your list of plants, and you have your map, and now you need to make sure you have all the materials to make that garden possible. I'm pleased to announce to you that we now have an online store for seedling sale at Upswing Farm. If you're like me, last year you went to the Upswing Farm seedling sale and you bought every plant on the table, and then you went home and realized you only had room for half of it. So this online store is a great way to shop and plan out before you start your garden. On the online store we have descriptions, and it'll also give you an opportunity to do some more research on your computer while it's up in front of you. If you would like to visit that online store, we will make it available and notify everyone, and you can visit www.upswingfarm.com. In the meantime, while you're not shopping for plants, you can go out and get more materials. There are also online ordering options if you're worried about going out. If you do decide to go out, just make sure you make it really safe for yourself. You're giving yourself distance, and you're also coming in with a list, knowing what you want and only touching what you want to get. We recommend buying locally. There are some great local options like Weston Nurseries. I was there the other day, and they're doing curbside pickup options so that you don't even have to go into the store. If you're looking to make a raised bed, Ashland Lumber delivers lumber to your house, and there might be some other more local options in your communities that I would recommend checking out. This is a great time to build a raised bed and get some materials delivered to your house so that when it is nice and sunny outside, all you have to do is go out and plant. I really enjoyed talking about the 5 steps to planting a garden with you today, and I hope you did too. In these next coming days, I hope you take some time to sit down with your family or your roommates or yourself and find time to go through these 5 steps as you're stuck at home. Please stay tuned for Brittany's next video on soil health. And in the meantime, I wish you some happy garden planning.